Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from sensory design experts like Dr. Hobie Wedler, who helps brands think beyond the visual, to today's guest, Mike Provance, whose technology helps independent wine and spirit retailers compete with the big box stores. In today's episode, it's sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. Mike, in short, if you're a business looking to retain a winery or craft beverage producer as a client, Barrels Ahead will figure out a way to make it happen. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Scout Driscoll of Vint. On last week's show, Scout and I discussed wine label design. Check out that episode to learn why it's more important now than ever to consider all viewing mediums when designing your new label. I am super excited to talk with today's guest, Mike Provance. Mike's a serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker on technology, business model innovation, and scaling startups. As a digital and technology strategist, Mike's built groundbreaking technology businesses and launched award-winning digital properties over the past 30 years in the financial, information, manufacturing, and healthcare industries. As a CEO, Mike currently leads 3x3, a marketing technology company focused on modernizing the way brands and liquor retailers engage and create discovery opportunities for the independent channel shopper. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Drew. Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm stoked to have you on. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you mentioned, I've been working around digital and data and the internet now for almost 30 years. I like to think of having been in the internet business for all four waves of it, from its very commercial beginnings, not going all the way back, but from its commercial beginnings to now seeing how artificial intelligence and all of that have shaped it. And in fact, I was talking recently about the fact that I got into this business before there were cookies, and now I've been in the business long enough to see cookies go away.
Oh, that's fantastic. What were the early days like? What were some of the first things you were doing on the internet?
Well, so the first company I had worked with at the time was a company called the Internet Group, and we renamed it Imperative back in the mid 90s. And we had built the first e-commerce systems. We built the first ones for a company called Micro Warehouse, selling computer parts.
Oh man, I remember that company.
Yeah, it was a big company, but it was one of the first to actually be on the internet selling product. I also, with that company, we were building the first personalization server for the internet. So the first means by which you could be remembered when you went to a website, left, and came back. And a company called MapQuest asked us to build their first version. So,
oh wow,
yeah, it was pretty cool to be building new to the world stuff back in the mid 90s.
Yeah, at the time I was working at a wine retail store, and I built their first website. Right, I think it was about 94, 95.
Yep, that's right. Right when we were launching MapQuest and launching the e-commerce platforms.
Oh, that's amazing. It took us a few years before we got into e-commerce. It was just a brochure site.
Yeah, well, it did take a while for the systems to support it. So
yeah, so you've started with personalization.
Yeah.
How have you seen it evolve over the last 30 some odd years?
It's funny that it's in some ways it's changed dramatically, in other ways it's stayed the same, right? So it's still about it's still very much about the producer remembering the shopper and pushing more of their product on the shopper as they come back. Think about all the times you sign in and shop for things on Amazon, or you buy something on Amazon, or you decide not to buy something, and then it's showing up in all the ads on all the other websites you're going to later. Well, that's a lot more aggressive than it ever used to be, but it's all pretty much the same thing. And in a lot of ways, it misses the mark about understanding the shopper.
Oh yeah, and I guess a lot of it about the personalization is I think it's gotten a little more accurate in some ways. Like I remember some of the things that I used to, cruise around the internet, and some of the cookies that used to get installed in my computer. And how the heck did that recommendation come from what I've
Yeah, it
done?
was a little more Wild West back then, definitely. And even with MapQuest, you would get recommendations that didn't necessarily make sense, but I think it was really a supply and demand problem that, you can't not recommend something if you've got the cookie wants to recommend something, so it's going to go to whatever's available.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So as more people embrace it, the more accurate it gets.
Yeah, the more people embrace it, the more suppliers of content that can be recommended come online, then it gets better and better and better.
Oh man. So your latest venture is kind of the latest iteration of this sort of personalization recommendation as a technology platform.
Yeah.
How did this idea for 3x3 come about?
So a couple different factors. I came in to help work with a company that was doing digital rebates in the independent alcohol space. So packaged liquor stores, forever hanging the paper rebates on the bottles or posting signs about it and digitizing that. But the challenge is that, in 2015, when that started, people were not downloading apps as frequently. And so app use was slowing down. But we knew from seeing what was happening there that there was an opportunity in this independent channel, the independent liquor store, the independent brand that sells to through those liquor stores. And we began to try to figure out what that looked like. And I coming in it not so much from the industry, but from outside, but having come from a healthcare startup where we were trying to aggregate lots of small dental practices to deliver services to them, the model was very similar, which was, you have all these small dental practices who are being, aggressively competed against by large corporate dental practices. Well, in this space, you had lots of mom and pop liquor stores all being really beat down by Total Wines and big box stores and grocery and everybody else, and all the rules and regulations that were changing in favor of largesse and in favor of online shopping like Drizzly and Amazon and others. So, we saw a mission in trying to help that mom and pop liquor store or even a small chain be competitive in a world that was very quickly changing to digital first, right? And you'd asked what was the same and different from when I started. The biggest thing was back then, most people didn't use the internet. Most people didn't use digital. It was a novelty. But today it's the reverse of that, right? Everyone's on it. 80%, 90% of Americans have access to the internet and internet shopping in one form or another through mobile or desktop. And worldwide, it's growing dramatically, primarily on mobile. But the stores hadn't changed their way of operating, right? And so they were kind of lagging the consumer shift to digital. And we saw an opportunity to help change that mindset with these independent retailers. And frankly, the brands that, even up to 2020 were still very traditional in their marketing mechanisms and how they reached shoppers, whether it was through, outdoor advertising or newspaper or magazine and television. And
the weekly newspaper food insert.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's changed now. Thankfully, they've recognized the value of digital, but it still takes a while for that to have an effect.
And that is so near and dear to my heart. I spent the bulk of my marketing career helping independent wine stores compete with the better leverage chain stores.
Yeah.
Then didn't have your technology. I wish we had, because most of the time back then was just convincing them that they need to be online and they need to be selling their products online. So you guys have taken it to another level. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, so we came into this in 2018, and there were a number of e-commerce players already lining up to help stores like the ones you're talking about figure out how to sell online. But what we looked across the kind of competitive landscape and saw was nobody was focusing really on how do you get shoppers to know that they want to shop in the local liquor store, right? When there's so many different options and so many different channels available for that shopper to buy alcohol. How do you help them find the brands that they want to find, right? Discovery is really core to the independent liquor store. But when you shop in a grocery store, you're not trying to discover the next new wine or the next new beer or spirit. You're just trying to stock up. And so how do we get them to the right liquor stores, and how do we get them finding the right brand? That was the problem that we set out to solve.
Well, that is key, because a lot of times, like if you're Googling your new, or searching for that new latest bourbon that's hard to find, oftentimes those independent stores aren't going to have the SEO push to even rank for those terms or even that product.
And even then, you're assuming that you know the name, right? But one of the magical aspects of that small liquor store is people don't walk in there with a shopping list. They walk in there and then they wander the aisles and they talk to the owner, and they, maybe discover a wine for dinner. They discover a tequila they've never tried, and that comes highly recommended. And so that magic of discovery, is something that was unique to the liquor store and not to the other channels. And we wanted to capitalize on that.
Oh, very good. Very good. So how did you guys capitalize on it? Explain this a little bit more.
So we started off really building a core of a data business, right? So we built a nationwide network of small retailers, about 1,500 of them, who were sharing their point of sale data with us, sharing, what was sold, the product sold. So we had, through that effort, built a data set of $10 billion worth of transactions that occurred over the last, say, 2 to 3 years, that gave us insights into the kinds of shopping behaviors that are out there, what's in a basket, right? This is data that nobody ever really had from the independent liquor store side. We had tons of data about what the retailers bought from the distributors, right? That was freely available, or not freely available, widely available. But nobody had ever really tried to collect in any systematic way a picture of the shopper on the back end, what products are leaving the store, what's going in the trunk, and what's the makeup composition of those baskets. So we set out to do that. We built a fairly massive data set that showed us the pictures of what happens in independent retail. But then we took it one step further, because the problem really wasn't understand the product dynamics and what's selling. It was, how do you translate that into what a shopper might be intending to buy in the future, right? How do we build a model that lets us compile all that data and look at it from the point of view of shopper behavior to make it predictive of other products that shopper might like to buy in the future? And so we've been able to translate what essentially is sales data into shopper behavior data that ties to how consumers think about drinking alcohol, how they decide based on their taste preferences what they're going to drink.
And this allows, how does this help the independent retail? So they now can predict. So your system helped them predict what the consumer might want to be doing or might want to be purchasing.
Correct. So it helps them think about things like merchandising or product selection. It helps them with discovery, right? So, the events of the recent past with the pandemic have forced a lot of retailers to rethink how they engage shoppers. And that engagement has moved from walking store aisles to showing up on their website or calling in for an order, and discovery pretty much died, right? But what we're working now with the retailers and brands to do is to inject discovery back in, but make it digital. How do you find, if you're sitting home and you're thinking about going down to the liquor store, but you realize you've got to call in that order, you got to go online and look. Most of the shopping sites are not geared toward discovery. They're geared toward convenience and velocity, right? It's really easy to find Tito's. It's really easy to find Johnny Walker on the website. It's not easy to find Koval whiskey on a website unless you're going to Koval's website and you have to know about them. Right? So what we're trying to do is speed up that process of discovery for the shopper. And what we've been able to do is take that sales data, translate it into how people like products. So to give you an example, from my own preferences, I drink a lot of Breckenridge bourbon, and so I tested our system. I wanted to see what it recommended, and it kicked back an Irish whiskey from a Chicago bar. It kicked back a $5,000 bottle of a special rare Jim Beam edition that isn't on the market anymore. And then it kicked back Koval, which is a small Chicago distiller. Right? And so I was heading through Chicago, stopped and bought a bottle. And it turned out the taste preference worked almost perfectly to fit my taste profile versus what the system told me I would like based off the shopping behaviors of thousands of other people. Right. And that's the kind of cool influence that we can have with retailers, because we can now help them have the power that a Total Wine has or that an Amazon has of recommending products to shoppers.
That's amazing. Absolutely. Going back a second on the data sets, just to put it into perspective. So you've got, $10 billion worth of, retail sales across 1,500. How does that compare with maybe because the Total Wine and BevMo, they've all had this type of analytics.
Sure. I mean,
how do those data sets compare?
Put it in perspective in terms of scale, right? We generate from our network about somewhere between $2.5 and $3 billion of sales data a year. That's roughly the size of a BevMo. That's roughly the size of a Total, right? In terms of the data flow that they're seeing. And so we have, by aggregating all these retailers, given these small retailers the same market power of gathering intelligence that a BevMo or a Total Wine has.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then as your footprint increases, your data set's just going to get that much larger and potentially expand faster.
Yeah, exactly. That's the game plan.
Oh, that's amazing. So so you have this data, you're recommending great bottles, and your service goes a little bit beyond that. How do you know how you actually do it, but what are some of the tangible ways that you help these retailers through 3x3?
Right. So 3x3's focus is shopper engagement. So we work with retailers and brands to identify the kinds of shoppers likely to want to shop in their store or buy a particular product. And then we'll help them run digital marketing campaigns, digital advertising campaigns, e-commerce campaigns to get the right shoppers to show up and purchase and get them, and that's either walking in the store, going online, whatever that outcome is that the store or the brand's looking for. But ultimately, it's about narrowing the pool of people you're selling to. Right? Historically, retail has always been about wait for people to walk in or just kind of blast the advertising in the Sunday circular. But the reality is, if we're going to learn from other industries where targeted marketing and precision marketing go on, those same models work here. If you can start with a good, clear picture of that shopper and what the bourbon shopper looks like or the tequila shopper looks like and how they may be similar or different from a red wine shopper or an IPA shopper. That's the modeling that we do. And then we narrow that audience down and help the store engage and help the brand engage in the best way possible for their business goals.
Oh man. So your platform actually helps them actually advertise online.
Yes. Advertise, drive them to their e-commerce sites, track the buying behavior so that they can see a translation from content that they delivered to sales outcome on the back end. It really depends on, oftentimes we're helping a brand figure out which retailers are their best sources of sales, right? It doesn't help anybody, retailer, distributor, or brand, if a product sits on the shelf because it's in the wrong store. So, in a lot of ways, we help the industry understand the best placement of products so that you can most efficiently sell.
Oh man, I wish you guys were around 30 years ago. It would have saved me a lot of struggle.
I remember that. I was working in a wine store in Boston 32 years ago. So I remember the same struggles.
So so we got the independent retailer. Speaking of independent, is it a 2-store chain, 1-store chain? How does someone get started with 3x3?
Yeah, so we define independent, and a lot of this is because every state defines it differently on what licensing laws are. But we look at independence as anyone that operates at kind of a local level at a store, right? So even BevMo in some ways is a local or is an independent store because until it got bought recently, but it doesn't deeply discount product. It's not trying to move people like Total Wine would off of mainstream brands to private label aggressively, right? So we focus on stores that are trying to they primarily only sell alcohol, right? They may have some food, but they're not like, it's not grocery plus a liquor store, it's the liquor store.
Mm-hmm.
Although, we do have some, in some states, you see a lot of liquor stores that almost look grocery-like in their floor plans. But where alcohol is their primary or main revenue stream, that's what we focus on. And we focus on helping them do that efficiently, whatever size that is, small chain, single store. Yeah, we have some single stores that are enormous in just the volume they do, because
Yeah,
how
I
they
can
organize.
imagine.
Yeah.
As far as for independent, I know one of the bigger challenges that I faced back in the day is we were we were helping independent retail stores market themselves, but they were very, very cautious about employing a marketing agency because we were also helping their competitors. And I kept trying to explain that the information's siloed. We're not sharing trade secrets. What sort of have you encountered that sort of objection, or how can you respond to an independent retail store just afraid of sacrificing their intellectual property?
Right. We're very careful not to use the raw data that a store gives us to drive those people to another store, or for that matter, from one brand to another brand, right? What we use the data to do is build models of the kinds of shoppers we're looking for, and then look locally around those shoppers. So we have, situations where we've got stores in the same market using our service, but they use it differently, right? One might use it to drive to their e-commerce site. Another might be driving only certain promotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's less about, people are going to make that decision where to go based off some set of information. So from our perspective, if you're a retailer and you've got to choose whether or not to do something that is, precise and highly targeted and going to bring you the kinds of shoppers you're looking for, it's worth that investment to do that, right? It's not like I'm going to take you and send you over here, even though I got you from store A. I'm going to build a model and find other people like you with your buying profile and send them to all the different stores in our network that are participating. So you're better off having that kind of activity than not. And people are going to shop in multiple stores, whether you like it or not, right? Mm-hmm. And all you can do as the store owner is give them the best experience possible. So I guess my typical response is, this is all part of a broader marketing strategy that you do for your store. And that marketing strategy has to be about the user experience. And so,
that's a great point. So your bulk data, even though it is shared at an anonymous level, really helps amplify each store's sort of unique experience, what they're emphasizing, what their strong points are, and you amplify that versus just create this generic kind of platform where everyone's doing the same thing.
Right. We're not trying to replicate the yellow pages and then give it to the right people. We're trying to say, look, if your store is a whiskey specialty store, then you're going to want a certain kind of shopper coming to your store. If you're a red wine, or if you're a wine, Italian wine specialty store, you're going to want a different kind of shopper. And today that you might not have a way to do that, right? You're going to hope that the right people find out about you and walk in, or you're going to run some ads in the right magazines and hope people walk in. But the reality is you're still going to get an inefficient pipeline of shoppers coming to your store.
Sure. And so for independent channels, both craft distillers and retail stores, what advice could you give them starting out online? Maybe even a precursor to leveling up to your 3x3 platform.
I think the most important thing is to start, right? I think Bruce Lee said that. just if you need to do something, just start doing it, because you're not going to have it perfect out of the gate. You're not going to need to invest a ton out of the gate. You just need to get people to know that you are digital friendly. Make it easy for them to find you. The simplest thing may be just making sure you're showing up on Google Maps, right? And putting some information there. That's probably the lowest budget way of having a presence online, is just make sure that the sources people use to find stores, like Google Maps or Apple Maps or what have you, or even MapQuest, because it's still around today, are that you're on there. And from there, it's all about deciding what you want to do and how it fits into your strategy. So, build a website. Definitely look at the e-commerce platforms that are out there. You want to make your product available to all different shoppers. And really, one of the things we've learned about shoppers today and how they're different, there's a lot less tolerance for being told how you're going to buy, right? We have a much stronger set of expectations around, I want to buy this online. If I want to buy it immediately online, then I'm going to go to the place that lets me do that. So as the retailer, if you're not making it super easy for that shopper to buy from you, you're losing out to someone else.
That's great advice. As far as choosing an e-commerce platform, what sort of advice could you give on a retailer on that who may be, looking at different systems and bells and whistles? What's something to look out for there?
Well, so there's a lot of different options, right? You can be a retailer that plugs in behind different aggregating sites like Minibar, Reserve Bar, or Drizzly, and just be the delivery arm for them locally. And that's a perfectly good alternative to having your own. But what we find from some of the best retailers in how they deploy things digitally, they don't depend on one channel, right? They may be a Drizzly partner, but they're also doing Minibar. They also have their own website. They also are part of a club. So it's different channels for different shoppers. And as a retailer, you want to be in as many places as you can so that you get the most shopper action.
That's a great point. And you know what? I don't think about that too often. You usually just think e-commerce, I'm online.
Right.
But to think of setting up different e-commerce channels, it,
Sure.
really just increases your footprint.
Yeah, I mean, just, the way I think about it is e-commerce channels from a retailer's point of view are just different sets of people they're reaching out to. And you're not going to get the same people in those different channels because everyone from a consumer point of view has their shopping preference.
That's great. So as far as 3x3, what else would you like us to know about it, or independent channels to know about this?
Well, I think the best thing to know about us is that our focus as an advocate for the channel, and we believe wholeheartedly in the long-term success and viability and life of the mom and pop liquor store, and that we're building our business around supporting the success of that channel. We also know that there are brands out there that find this channel to be hugely important to their success, and those are the kinds of brands that we work with to help move through the channel. So our focus is on precisely moving shoppers through their journey and helping brands and retailers be the recipients of that.
Amazing. Going back a second, so you mentioned that $5,000 Irish whiskey. Did you do a taste test?
I didn't taste test that one. No, I had to draw a line somewhere, but the Koval was, I think, around $50 and really worth the purchase.
And you are a bourbon guy. What aside from Breckenridge and Koval, what are you enjoying lately?
Yeah, I've actually started to branch out to more American whiskeys I tend to prefer a smoother one. So I've tried some ryes that I think are fantastic. Distillery 291 has a fantastic one. I fell in love with High West maybe 6 years ago when I was in Utah and went to their bar and they made me a dead man's boot. So I still love a good High West bourbon every so often. Their Campfire rye is good, but I used to be a Scotch drinker, so I'm starting to try to get back into that and some of the Japanese ones as well, just because I miss some of the Highlands.
Yeah, I just started diving into some of the Japanese whiskeys myself. Have you had locally here we're based out of Carlsbad and down here in San Diego. Have you tried any of Malahat's whiskeys?
Malahat's? No, I haven't. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
It's a kind of a micro distillery down here, but they're doing some excellent collaborations with some breweries where they'll share the barrels and then they'll age the whiskey in like a former IPA barrel, or even there was a coffee producer, Mostra Coffee. So they age the whiskey in the coffee barrel, which gives it just a slight nuance, which is really cool.
All right. I'm gonna check that one out. That sounds good. I like those. I like some of those unique flavorings that they do with the barrel, because in some cases that's more marketing, but with bourbon in particular, with whiskey in particular, it really does affect the flavor in meaningful ways.
Yeah, a little subtlety. And then you've got the that Alembic distiller that does the Racer 5 whiskey.
Oh, I haven't had that, but I've heard of
that. It's Charbae spirits. And what they do is I guess they take a tanker of Racer 5 IPA and actually distill the IPA. So it's not even finished. It's just made from the IPA, which has a really distinct hoppiness.
Okay.
That's another one of the favorite ones I like right now.
Racer 5. All right. You gave me a couple to check out. This is good.
Yeah. So Mike, is there anything else? Where can people find you in 3x3 online?
Right. So our website is 3x3.us, 3x3.us. And that's the easiest place to find us. I'm Mike at 3x3.us if you want to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Today we've been talking with Mike Provance of 3x3 Insights. Now, if you're an independent retailer looking to level it up and compete with the big box stores, you got to check them out. Thank you so much, Mike, for being on today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.